Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a very special MPG primer, doing something different today where we have a career panel, and I'm going to hand it off to Pam to get things kicked off. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, great. So thank you all for coming in person and online. And it's really my pleasure to introduce this panel of esteemed scientists. I know each of them through different channels, and I will let them introduce themselves, but I just wanted to thank them for coming and sharing your journeys. I think what the first thing we wanted to do is have each of you spend a few minutes, just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your journey and where you started and where you are now, and then we can take it from there. Thanks. Go ahead, Joanne.
Yeah. All right, great. Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be back here. I think for many of us, we spend time at the Broad, and it's always fun to walk back in the doors again. And so great to get a chance to meet all of you and talk. For me, I started out probably like many of you with a PhD in science. I studied biochemistry at Berkeley and then did a postdoc, actually two postdocs, one in Children's Hospital in Paris and then one at Genentech. After that, I was stepping back, as many of you may do, and thinking about what to do with the research background that I had. I knew that I really loved science and I really loved research, but I didn't necessarily really like doing research myself. And so with that, I was looking for ways to be involved in, kind of the forefront of science. And especially my interest has always been in drug discovery and looking for different ways to do that. And so I went first to Nature Publishing Group, where I got the chance to work with Pam and with Kyle to start up a journal called that was new at the time, called Nature Chemical Biology. And so I spent a bunch of time there getting to know the chemical biology community, early stage drug discovery, and from there met people at the Broad and got the chance to move here and work here on a bunch of different projects that were all connected to either discovering and validating targets for drug discovery or early stage drug discovery with small molecule tool compounds, small molecule discovery. I found from working here that I really loved the science. I really loved the early stages of drug discovery, but I wanted to really be a part of then taking that drug discovery forward and into the clinic, and wanted to do that on the business side rather than on the science side. And so I went from there to F Prime Capital, where I worked within a early stage venture investor and got to see how they thought about science that was investable and how to progress companies. And from there, got the chance to co-found with two faculty from the Broad, Stuart Schreiber and Ramnik Xavier, about 8 years ago or so now, a company called Janana, where we had a small molecule discovery platform, took that company through into the clinic and proof of concept. It got bought by a Japanese pharmaceutical company last year, and now have jumped into another startup company with technology out of UMass Medical team working on RNAi approaches for neurological diseases. And so with that, I'll pass over, but just to give you a sense of all the many different kinds of places I was able to go and work with a PhD in science.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Stoppel. I'm a partner at a healthcare-specific investment firm based in Boston called RE Capital Management. I started out my career also doing a PhD at MIT, actually. I was over at the Pickhour Institute across the street. Actually, not a Broadie, but collaborated with Ed Skolnick, was at the Broad at the time. Collaborated with his group and the medicinal chemistry unit doing some drug validation and preclinical mouse models. Kind of always knew that I didn't want to be in academia, but didn't exactly know where I would go. Kind of assumed I would go into biotech, more in a research role. Towards the end of my PhD, developed a pretty debilitating mouse allergy, and mouse was my model system. So kind of a oh no moment of what am I going to do with my life? So the BCS Brain and Cognitive Science graduate program is actually really supportive and entrepreneurial, and gave the grad students a ton of money to organize a career fair. Turns out it's really hard to organize a career fair. I thought like companies would be piling in to come meet with us grad students. Not the case. So it was definitely a heavy lift. And at the time, I was just chatting with a friend and colleague from material science, or a former grad student at the time who worked at RA Capital. And he was like, well, why doesn't RA Capital come? How about finance? And I was like, I don't think anyone's going to be interested in finance, but thank you. But desperation got the best of me and invited them in, and actually learned a lot more about this world of healthcare investing through that process. Ended up, really resonating with kind of this idea that I could use my scientific training to look at companies developing really cool different types of science and drugs and modalities. Ended up joining as an associate on what's called the Tech Atlas team. So it's kind of our internal think tank research engine made up of largely PhDs and MDs that work alongside the investment team to diligence all the investable opportunities that come our way. And ended up really loving investing and stepping onto the investment team a number of years later. So RA Capital is a multi-stage investment firm. What that means is we do everything from venture capital, new company formation, similar to what you would think of like the flagships and Arches and Third Rocks of the world. And we do everything from that to public market investing, including now as some of our portfolio companies have matured, commercial stage companies. So it kind of spans the entire gamut of company life cycle. As a part of that, I have an opportunity to not only look at and invest in really cool companies, but also join the board of companies and really help shape the direction of the company. Actually, RA Capital was an investor of Joanne's company, and we were really excited to support that company through to the end. That's how I got to where I am.
Hi, everyone. I'm Serena Silver. I actually know Pam from our time at NYU in the same Fly Lab and applying to PhD programs basically around the same time. I did my PhD right next door at the Whitehead. And then I did a postdoc at Harvard Medical School, both in Drosophila labs, which is not your typical path to industry. So, but I think the basis of genetics was really key in my transitions. While I was a postdoc, I realized that, I had kind of been on that academic career path and realized that wasn't the path for me. And so started to look around and understand how I could make that transition. This was a long time ago. So it was the dawn of RNAi, and actually the dawn just before we started to be able to do RNAi in mammalian cells at scale. And so I came to the Broad in 2006 to lead the first screening projects, RNAi screening projects. CRISPR didn't exist. I know that might be hard for some of you to believe, but there were zinc fingers, which were really tedious, and then RNAi, which was super exciting at the time. And so took the experience I had with RNAi screens in Drosophila cells and brought them over to work in human and mouse projects in what was then the RNAi platform, now the GPP. And spent 5 years building screens, collaborating with folks all over MIT and Harvard and beyond, and then made a transition to industry. So I was recruited to Sanofi, so big pharma experience. There I was in the target discovery group, ultimately led that group, and then moved over to Novartis to lead the molecular pharmacology group, which is another way of saying cellular assays that enable drug discovery. So both of those were actually in the oncology space. My career has kind of gone from that early discovery all the way now into clinical. So, at Sanofi, it was really all about target discovery, target validation. At Novartis, it was around actually, now that we have found the target, and there's still some target discovery there, and actually some big CRISPR screening efforts. But now that we found the target, how do we develop the best cell assays to actually find drugs, small molecules, or biologics that meaningfully biologically move the biology the way we want it to actually address disease? After Novartis, I loved what we could do there. I mean, the amazing capabilities at a place like that. But there's also a lot of process in a big in a big organization. And so I was excited by the idea of going to a smaller company where I could have more day-to-day impact on strategy and really be part of driving the company forward. And I joined a biotech called Therapeutics, which is a rare disease company. It was in some ways kind of going back to my Drosophila genetics days and developmental biology days of how could we actually address these genetic diseases, especially sickle cell disease and muscular dystrophies like FSHD. While I was there, we brought a small molecule to the clinic for sickle cell disease, which is actually just had a really exciting readout at ASH this week. A few years ago, I really wanted to go back to oncology, just driven by, I think many of us have a lot of personal connections to oncology and really wanted to move back to that space. And so I joined Accent Therapeutics, first as vice president of biology, and now this beginning of this year became the chief scientific officer. So Accent is a small molecule oncology company looking for precision oncology targets that can really address very selected populations based on genetics or cell state in oncology. And we have 2 programs in the clinic. So we became a clinical company about a year ago. So it's been really exciting to kind of go from those early target discovery efforts now to actually, working with investigators and clinicians to bring these molecules to patients. And I was at the Broad from 2006 to 2011. So before this whole extra building was happening, I've actually parked, my parking spot used to be on so many places that there's now a gigantic building. It's really disconcerting to drive through Cambridge.
So I'm Kyle Vogan. I'm an editor with Nature Genetics based here in Boston. My path into science started in Montreal, where I grew up, and went to McGill University, and in the course of my undergrad there, got interested in, academic research, especially in my senior year in the honors project. So I was enjoying what I was doing. I ended up staying at McGill for my PhD in the same lab that I'd done my undergrad honors project in, and really loved, the process of doing science. Certainly was on a traditional academic track. About halfway through my PhD, I remember seeing a job ad for an editorial position at Cell and thought to myself, that looks interesting. But of course, at that moment, I was busy doing my PhD and fully committed to sort of the academic career path. And it was in a biochemistry department, but doing mouse genetics. And ironically, I also developed a mouse allergy. I don't know if that would have stopped me from working in a mouse lab, but as it happened, I was very interested in developmental biology, and the lab that I ended up being drawn to is a lab that worked primarily using the chick model. So at Harvard Medical School with Cliff Tabin. So I came down to Boston for my postdoc and was enjoying, that process. And again, thought I was on a traditional, academic path, but I discovered as I went through it that there were certain things that came naturally to me, other things that came less naturally to me. And I noticed one thing that other people seem to have, which I lacked, was this determination to work through problems at the bench. And so I could, I could always find energy to read, write, talk about science. And I enjoyed doing experiments and loved when they worked, but if they didn't work, I didn't necessarily have the same grit that I saw other people had. So at some point I had to decide, okay, am I going to make this academic career work? I thought I could if I really wanted it, but I wasn't sure anymore that I did. And I wondered what else could I do? And editing had always been in the back of my mind because it was something that came naturally to me in terms of, I had a lot of opportunities to write, review type things. I always was kind of the person that people would go to when they had their manuscript and they wanted some feedback on it. So, Short of it was I finally decided, okay, I'm ready to make that, jump in that direction. And Nature Genetics happened to be a journal that was hiring. So I applied, interviewed, got the job, and that was in 2003. And I've stayed with the journal through since then, initially working in New York City, but I relocated back to Boston. And that, I will add that that's a little bit not typical. Most editors who go into it, some like me do stay in it for the long haul. Other people do it for a season, move on to something else like Joanne or Pam. So it definitely can be a full career. It can also be a step along a career towards something else.
so much. I think we'll ask one question and then we'll open it up to everybody. We're wondering, what skills do you use most often in your role that you didn't expect to rely on? Thoughts?
I guess for me, the part of my role that I like the best is the part that's science as a foundation, but it's really connecting with people and team and finding the right set of people that have the right, technical and scientific capabilities, but the right passion for solving the same problem. And so it's really the people and team part of it that in my mind makes the difference between things really, really tough problems being able to succeed, but also it being fun along the way, whether you succeed or not. Sometimes the science doesn't work. And so I would say the people part of it is the part that the science is the foundation, but that's what I really love to be able to build on to do.
I don't know that this isn't surprising. Data analytics for sure. I mean, certainly analyzing my own data as a PhD student, like the expectation is that you'll do that, but just developing the skill set to analyze literally any data set that comes your way. I was very focused on preclinical data when I was doing my PhD, but now I spend so much time analyzing clinical data. And, it's a lot of the same, kind of what you need to pay attention to, picking up on small nuances and differences. And so certainly like a strong foundation in data analytics. And the other thing is just having, the kind of executive presence to go into a room, meeting with management teams of companies, and certainly that was very intimidating for me initially coming straight out of my PhD, and they're putting me in, the room with the CEO and the CMO of this company, and I'm leading that meeting. But certainly like lab meeting presentations and just the back and forth and dialogue that happens there, the ability to ask critical questions in, a productive way. Those are definitely like soft skills that I picked up during my PhD that I use a lot of at RA.
Yeah, I would definitely echo, the team social emotional dynamics and the data analytics. I would actually also say, first principles, that sort of foundation of like being able to understand why something isn't working or pick up on things to ask those questions. It's really, because I'm not in the lab, I'm also like removed enough that I can sort of sometimes kind of pick up on those. And I'm always pleasantly surprised where I feel like I've actually still added value, even though I'm not in the lab anymore with a question around experimental design or troubleshooting. I think the other thing I just want to echo from what Laura said is that the presentation skills are so hugely important. And in my PhD advisor, like she was so amazing about making us all do practice talks. You'd give a practice talk and you'd go through it all, and then the lab would give you feedback and nitpick on every single slide. And that was the best training for everything I do today. Like communicating your science clearly and the message and the storytelling, the more you practice that, even in my postdoc, there were some postdocs when they were going on their job interviews, like they just went on their own. They were like, I know I can give my job talk. I know my sites. And I'm sure, and many of them got great jobs. But there were others who actively sought feedback along the way and just practice that, because it's going to be the most valuable thing that you can do. And just, having no ego about your slides, about what you put together, and just saying like, help me make this better. Like I had a office mate at Novartis who, actually remember in my interview, like she was actually the most intimidating person who interviewed me, right? And then I was like, oh, I have to share an office with this person, right? And we became great friends, but she was also the person, like if I was going to present something, if I showed her that slide, like she would be like, what's that point there? Right. So she was actually like the best person to go to because she would actually pay attention. So both developing that skill set to pay attention to those details in your own data for your peers, and when you find that those people who actually can give you that constructive criticism and feedback, like cultivate that relationship, keep asking for that feedback, get really used to that, because it actually will make all your science better and all your communication better.
For me, the thing that stands out is the need to be a lifetime learner and especially, obviously, science is always, moving forward, and even in, a particular subject area, there's always new things to be learning. But I'm amazed at how much I have to draw on all of the different things I've learned over the years. Even, at a genetics journal, sure, we're publishing genetics, but we need to know biochemistry or molecular biology or cell biology or physiology or anatomy, developmental biology. And so again, just having that ability to, absorb and then draw on all that broad knowledge base to be able to kind of appreciate, manuscripts that are spanning across a really broad spectrum of science. So, yeah.
I thought we'd open it up for questions. Anyone have anything? Go for it. If not, I can keep asking, but.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's so cool to have like such a large variety of the non-academia represented here. But it still sounds like you all had an academic background and you all did a PhD. And I know that multiple people in this room, including myself, don't have a PhD, but work as staff scientists definitely on a postdoc level and have the experience. Now you hear often that, oh, it's getting less and less important in industry, but oftentimes when you see job postings, it's always still like a hard requirement. Do you have any advice for people like me when you are approached or get applications by people who don't have that formal requirement? Yeah, any advice or how you see that, how you would approach that?
Sorry. Yeah. So we don't require a PhD or MD to join kind of our I guess, research group, the Tech Atlas group that would kind of lead up into the investment team. Most of the people do have a PhD or MD, but there are certainly some folks who have actually stepped onto the investment team. Actually, one of our managing partner founders, doesn't have a PhD. It's really about demonstrating the ability to, kind of analyze data at that level. And at RA, we do have kind of in the application process, there's an assignment as part of it. It's not really a case study like you would do with consulting, but sort of similar. So there's an opportunity to prove that out. So, I think developing a strong network and, kind of getting your foot in the door to then be able to prove that like, hey, I actually have the same skill set that everyone who was silly enough to sit through 5+ years of a PhD and postdoc. But yeah, I would say don't let it hold you back. Certainly it just probably takes a little bit more of kind of that initial step to get, the folks' attention to give you the opportunity. But certainly there have been a lot of really, really impressive colleagues that I've worked with who do not have PhDs.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things on that. Like certainly, I've had people in my teams at Novartis, in Fulcrum, at Accent, who have had, and at Sanofi, basically across the gamut, who've had what we would consider like PhD level roles, lab head type of roles without a PhD. They generally had more time in, sort of equivalent amounts of time in terms of experience and building up that experience and knowledge. What I would say in terms of critical things to be able to make that jump, if you think about what someone's being asked for in a job application or in, if they're coming from a PhD or postdoc, they have a story, a scientific story to tell in terms of what they've done as an independent strategy, thinking through the next steps, planning those next steps. 100% many people without, does not require a PhD to do that, right? But I think what you want to pay a lot of attention to is how are you telling that story of your contributions, of your skill set, and sort of demonstrating that for, the person on the other side of the page. And, ideally, as Laura said, you're doing some networking so people know you as more than just that, sheet of paper. But I think those opportunities to give a talk at forums at the Broad, to be part of, you don't have to be the first author on the paper, but, there should be figures that you could point to and be like that, this, and for most industry kind of lab-based jobs, you will be asked to give a scientific presentation, for example, right? So, and you've seen, if you're here, you've seen lots of beautiful presentations. Think about what yours looks like. Start to build that that storyline. And again, it can come from different parts, and we all present data that is done as a team, but being able to sort of say, these were my ideas. This is, what the next step was. A lot of, a question I ask a lot of people when interviewing people for like entry level industry jobs is like, what is coming from academia, right? It doesn't have to be that what they did is exactly on target for what we want, but I'm asking for like, how are they thinking, right? So how does what you did, what are the next steps? What's that enabling in the lab? What's that getting people excited about? And sort of demonstrating that you're thinking like people who are asked to think that way as a PhD, not because others don't have that capability, but just hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think, and the only thing I would add is all of us here and so many people, you end up working on things that are not anywhere near the science you did your PhD in. And so, and it can be that with a PhD, you learn how to think very deeply about exactly what you're doing, the details, the nuance, the next question. But when you go beyond that, it's really more the ability to step back and see the big picture and know how to ask the right questions and know how to put what you hear in context of a bigger landscape, whether it's a bigger science landscape or a business landscape. And so I think although a lot of people do have PhDs and MDs, in the end, it's when you have conversations with people, there's equally, no requirement at all. And lots of people who succeed because of the way that they think about the context of the science and the bigger picture and the impact. And I think in a conversation, it's really easy for that to come through. And so to me, in the places I've been as well, I don't see, it's how you think about and approach how you spend your time and the questions you ask that makes the most difference.
Thank you all.
So,
Hello, thank you very much for this organization. I would like to ask, like, considering this rapid evolvement of technology and science, like you example, there wasn't CRISPR, but there was at least zinc finger. So in academia, we are pretty much like subject to adapt these new developments all time. I wonder how it feels in the other career paths, like this. Like, I don't know, now we are speaking of AI and then there was another stuff. So I just wonder how it feels and how you, what kind of suggestions you would give us and who try to grow in this ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that on the publishing side of things that we're in, I guess it's the same situation for us as we're watching the field and trying to anticipate, where the field is going. So again, I've been at the journal for more than 20 years. So when I started, microarrays were just coming out, and suddenly there was, exome sequencing and whole genome sequencing. And it really, I think, and then all the omics technologies that the technology has really driven the directions that the fields have gone. So from our point of view, it's recognizing where the field is heading and trying to get ahead of that, to be able to prioritize the right areas. Yeah.
Yeah, when you initially asked your question, right, what immediately came to my mind was AI. And it's something that it's such a broad term and it could apply to so many different things. It could apply to drug development, or it could just apply to productivity and the kind of AI tools that you use in your everyday. I think for me, that's really what I've had to adapt to. I think I was labeled a dinosaur by my boss. And I've seen some of the younger colleagues that I have that come in and have really leaned into it, and just the productivity that they've been able to gain by embracing it. And it's hard to carve out that time to actually do it, but I definitely think it's worthwhile to, stay up to date on all of the emerging, assays, modalities, AI that you can, because there are other people doing it, and that's giving some folks an edge. So I think it's worth the investment for sure.
I'll give maybe a little counter to that, which is, I think it can be so exciting, all the new technologies. I think the more you can ground it in the key questions, the more you'll be able to differentiate. So it's not, I think you get some exposure. Obviously, if you're good at it, if it's exciting to you, lean into what you're excited about. But it can be tempting to sort of feel like, oh, everyone's doing AI image analysis or whatever it is, but does your project need AI image analysis, or would it really be better served by, a different technique, right? Like scanning EM or whatever. I'm making things up, right? But I think just really coming back to like the clear scientific questions and goals and how the technology can serve those, and not being too worried about like, I have to be doing the latest thing.
It's funny, it's actually at RA Capital that they have this question that we got asked when I was at my last company all the time, which is like, oh, sure, you have a really cool technology, but like, what's the killer actual drug discovery clinical development app for that? And finding that, like, where does a new technology connect with clinical impact and company value? And so it's a kind of a multifactorial challenge to come to the right answer to that, but that's part of what makes biotech and fun actually is trying to find that intersection.
I guess I'll add one more thing too. Like, this is also an area where flexing those collaboration and teamwork muscles can be fantastic, right? So at my company, we're not an AI company. We're like really, hardcore biochemists, biologists. But we have a great partnership now with an AI company that we're working with. We just had a poster at the recent triple meeting where we had co-authored some work where basically, some of our biological findings and how could we translate that, and could we use their AI model to sort of do some digital pathology type of interpretation. So, I think these are all different avenues too to think about, well, here's my scientific problem. Is there a really cool technology lab that, would make sense to collaborate with, so I can learn more from like the people who are truly in this space and also advance the project. So.
Guys, I have a question. So as people that are considering to go into industry and not wanting to continue an academic path, I'm wondering, like, if we want to get into industry, I know you guys mostly did postdocs before going to industry, and I guess you had gone from grad school to industry. So I'm wondering, now there's a lot of like fellowships to go into like, biotech, like postdoc positions in biotech or VC fellowships. So do you think people wanting to break into industry need to get these like fellowships or maybe internships to get experience in these fields, or do you think it's still possible to come in with like none of this experience? Because now it seems like you kind of have to get experience to get in this field, and kind of seems impossible to break out, once you've only been in academia.
I can definitely speak from the venture side of things. We've certainly hired people that have been at some of these fellowships, but the vast majority of hires that we make did not. I don't think it's a bad idea to do a fellowship, especially if the bandwidth to take that on with everything else that I'm sure you have going on. But it's certainly not a requirement. And, at RA, I think we maybe have a different mentality than a lot of our peers, and we love to train people internally. We think kind of a little bit different sometimes, especially being a multi-stage investment firm. Like Joanne said, we're not just looking at like, is that, modality, that platform, is it awesome? Is it going to be a game changer? But like, what are you applying it to? Like, are you actually going to develop in a meaningful enough market opportunity or unmet need in order to attract later stage investors? So, we typically like to kind of train people internally. And while we've had very successful folks join our team from doing those fellowships, it is absolutely not required.
Yeah, I was laughing when I was on my way over thinking that so many people that I worked with at the Broad now are in industry, whether it's venture or pharma or biotech, in all different kinds of roles. And so many of the people that I worked with that were in venture, biotech, and industry are now, in academics and at the Broad. And so, at least for me, from when I started, everything feels so much more flexible now, where there's many different paths you can go on, in and out of all these different types of organizations. And so to me, I wouldn't be so fixed on the path, but really like at each step, you only have so many opportunities, that present at any moment in time when you're thinking about your next step, and just choosing the one that seems most exciting, where you learn the most.
Yes, I would echo the learn the most part, right? So I think a few years ago, there was a lot of movement right from grad school to industry. If you go 5 years before that, you definitely needed a postdoc. I think we're back in an era where the job market's a lot tighter. So, having more experience can differentiate you, especially, even if it's more academic experience. So just, I think a lot of it also obviously depends on, how you fit the roles that they're looking for. Is there a special skill set? Is there, a secret sauce that are you coming from a lab that is super relevant to the company that you're applying to? I think, there's, what is it you're going to learn in your postdoc? What is it that you're going to be establishing? One of the things back when we really required postdocs, one of the things we were looking for there was typically grad students are less independent in terms of their project planning, project selection than grad students, right? That's not necessarily the case, and it really depends on whose lab you're in, and the structure of that. So think about the ways your skills have developed. The other thing I'll just say is that, grad school, you never know when it's going to end, right? You've got this sort of long time horizon. Postdocs are different, right? I did a 2-year postdoc. A lot of people I know did shorter postdocs, especially if you do an industry postdoc, those tend to be 2 or 3 years, right? So it is, think about what you'll learn in that situation, if it's worth it, if it makes sense. I will say, at Novartis, we had a ton of, this is a really, really robust and well-respected postdoc program. Every postdoc I know from Novartis has gone on to fantastic industry jobs. There is probably no better way to build an industry network, because between the people at Novartis and the people who leave Novartis while you're there, you will know somebody in 100 companies in the Boston area and beyond. So, but again, it really will depend on your situation, but there are so many things you would learn in some of those, environments as well.
So I'm wondering how you see opportunities for scientists evolving outside of academia in the next 5 to 10 years, and if we should be keeping our eye on specific sectors as we look.
That's a tough question. Definitely, as we were just hearing, the job market is changing a lot and industry is changing a lot. Definitely, I'm not the person who's the best at having the broad view of where we're headed. But at least from sitting from the biotech pharma investing side, everything feels like it's getting so much more global. And so the ability to interact and find the right people with the right technologies or the right capital or the right clinical sites on a global basis gets more and more important. And so a network in Boston is always a fantastic thing to have, but I feel more and more that there's a lot more balance in terms of where innovation and where science is happening and where money is found. And so having the broader global view of biotech, pharma, drug discovery industry feels more and more important to me.
I can answer this from the lens of a VC, and where I see a lot of innovation and my expectations over the next couple of years. I think it's a funny coincidence at RA that many of us on the investment team actually did PhDs in neuroscience. And it's like, what, why is that? And, one of the reasons could be that, 10 years ago, when I finished my PhD, it was really hard to develop companies or start companies or develop drugs in CNS. There are just a lot of barriers in terms of accessing the brain, getting enough drug across the blood-brain barrier, having adequate targets, heterogeneity of disease, like lack of understanding of the genetic makeup of some of these more broad buckets of disease like autism spectrum disorder. And I think that there's been a lot of progress there over the last couple of years, especially in unlocking some of these, getting drug across the brain, for example, and better understanding of the genetics of some of these diseases. So I expect to see some more innovation, hopefully. I think it's a huge unmet need. I kind of heard that, there's been so much innovation in cancer biology and drugs for cancer because we understand the genetics and have the ability to do, very specific and targeted drug development approaches. And we're getting there with neuroscience. So I think that is definitely an area that I really hope that we'll see more innovation over the next 5 to 10 years.
Hello. I'm wondering if you could go back, is there anything you would have done differently to prepare for your career?
There's nothing I would have done differently. I feel like the fact that I did nothing to prepare for my career actually made me kind of the best employee at RA Capital, and probably one of the reasons why I was so successful. Like I came in with a completely blank slate, and I just wanted to absorb and learn and ask questions. And I was able to kind of learn on the job, which is really cool to have the opportunity to do it. And so I can't say that I would have changed a single thing.
I would probably just tell myself to be more patient. He's laughing. That's my husband over there. Because I think there were times where I was super frustrated that things weren't going as fast as I wanted, or I wasn't getting a promotion as fast. And I think, there's so many things I learned along the way. There were times when I took a more lateral move, which gave me actually so much more breadth of experience. And I don't think I even understood at the time how valuable that breadth of experience would be in addition to kind of the depth you get in a PhD. And so, just having a bit more patience because, then things all kind of clicked into place.
Yeah, and I would say for my current role, I don't think there's anything that I could have or should have done differently that would have put me in a better place to do what I'm doing now. For me, it's more the question of what if I had done something completely different and how would my life be different? But that's, that's sort of more of a life question, like, gee, what if I had gone to med school instead of, or what if I had X or Y or Z? But as far as for being prepared to do the job of an editor, I feel like, the things that, I did along the way equipped me well to do the job that I'm doing.
No, I mean, the same. Yeah, I wouldn't do anything differently, but also no step was predictable along the way. And you have to stay true to your own personalities and interests. And there's people that I know that I admire so much where they knew exactly where they wanted to head and they, charted the path to get to where they wanted to be in an amazing way. I know other people like me too that, you had no idea where you wanted to head and you just kind of took it as it came and that worked out. And, but it's what, it's what makes you excited every morning to get up and do what you're doing that makes the most difference.
I have a kind of related question, but you all kind of changed path a little bit. Did you learn it on the job? Like you said, yeah, but did you get also some extra formal training, like, I don't know, in business or whatever to help you be successful in the new job or?
Yeah, I have to say both Sanofi and Novartis had really fantastic programs around management and around business. I did like a mini MBA. I don't think anyone with an MBA would really call that, but program at Sanofi that was super helpful to sort of learn more about the business side of things. When I was at Novartis, they had really fantastic management training, and not just the training itself, but because you did those as a cohort with people, it was also like a really fantastic bonding experience with a smaller group of your colleagues from across the organization, actually, which is also really important in a big place like that. The other training that I've sought out over the years is also mentoring programs through things like AWIS or HBA, which have all been fantastic and are things that really also can grow with you. I was also part of a group at Google Ventures. So I think really seeking out these things both inside your organization and external can be super, super powerful.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. So I did like all the training and what I actually do in my role. I received, in my capacity at RA Capital. Like I'm so lucky and grateful to have such incredible mentors there who really took the time to take me on and develop me as an investor. I've paid that forward and taken on a number of colleagues that I work with very closely and helped develop them as well. But to echo, AWIS, for example, I was a mentee there back in the day, and actually it was coincidental is at the time that I was interviewing for my job at RE Capital. So they helped me talk through like how to negotiate a salary. Like that's terrifying, especially coming out of your PhD where I'm like, I make $30,000 a year. Like I will literally work for, for that. So, it's a starting point. But yeah, and then I became a mentor down the line. So certainly seek out opportunities like that. There's a lot that you can do if you're interested in biotech investing. This is going to sound really silly, but probably the best thing you can do is follow what we call like bio Twitter. Go on Twitter and follow a bunch of personalities who like follow these stocks really closely, follow the data coming out. It's kind of good exposure into what it would be like to actually be in that world. But yeah, I can't say that, like reading a textbook on how to make a financial model is going to be very helpful.
Yeah, I would actually just also, there's a couple podcasts out there. There's Biotech Hangout, which covers a lot of those Twitter folks. And actually, I'll make a plug for the RA Capital website because there's a lot of learning stuff on there. It's actually really, and it's all freely available. There's a lot of just like how does this work? This investing thing, like at a high level, but that's really, I think, a good place to start as a scientist.
Yeah, and I think what everybody has said, there's formal and there's informal ways to learn what you need to learn, same as PhD or not doing a PhD. But the one is learning the things you need to know, but the other part that's so important is meeting the people that help open up the opportunities to take a new job, to be a mentor. And so wherever are the places where you both learn, but also broaden the people who's you build relationships with, who can mentor you, who you can mentor over time as well. And there's lots of ways to do that, but it helps a lot to continue to learn, but also continue to meet new people and hear their thoughts as you go.
So we're running at the end of time, and I thought we would end with just everyone giving their last piece of advice, maybe keep it to a sentence or two, for the trainees in the room seeking non-academic career paths.
I would say try to know yourself and pursue the thing that you think lines up best with your skills, interests, and heart.
Yeah, keep coming to things like this. Look for organizations like AWIS, like HPA, like various scientific organizations. Look for ways to share your science, and yeah.
I'd say keep an open mind and stay curious. If I had actually had the opportunity to dismiss finance, as my gut was to do, I would have never ended up where I am, and I absolutely love what I do. So just keep an open mind.
Yeah, there's just so many opportunities, and they're as exciting science as what you do in academics, but just from different aspects. And so don't be afraid. There's just so many different opportunities that are all terrific to be able to pursue.
I think we can end, and then for folks here, we all meet over there at 9:30 for the talk.